Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I should start off with the customary thanks. A heartfelt thank you to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Government of Bangladesh, for instituting this chair, the Bangabandhu Professorial Fellowship, and to the South Asia Institute at Heidelberg and the University Grants Commission in Bangladesh for the selection they made and placing their trust in me. It is a great honor for me, and in a sense, a crowning glory, because I had not thought that I would, such trust would be placed in me. Today, I want to thank the Department of Political Science, especially Professor Rahul Mukherjee, for inviting me to give this talk. And my thanks would be incomplete without a special word to Professor Hans Harder, Professor Kama Martin, and Dr. Martin Gieselman for facilitating my term here and making things so pleasant for me. As I said, it's really an honor to be here, and I have another talk coming up on the 26th, so do forgive me if I'm a bit incoherent and sound rushed. Okay. Now, Professor Mukherjee has given a very good but short introduction to the person that I will be talking about today. As I entered the room, the lady in the audience there said something that really lifted my spirits up. She said that I'm really looking forward to the talk because she is so well known. And that was such pleasant music to my ears, that Rokeya, who is a sort of icon in the South Asian women's history, movement, women's Nari Bhavna, as we call it, the women's question, and Ketuki Kushari Dyson, the renowned Tagore scholar, has called Rokeya the first feminist of India, Hindu, Muslim notwithstanding. So that is indeed a rare honor, and she gave her reasons in her wonderful book, Robindranath Victoria Wakampur Shondhani, the English of which, In Your Blossoming Flower Garden, she gives the reasons why Rokeya. But of course, there were others very near in the pantheon, like Sharla Devi Chodhurani, and my particular favorite, Pandita Ramabai. Now, without further ado, Rokeya is very much there in the internet, and the Oxford Dictionary of National Biography, I think about 15, 20 years back, for the first time thought of including Rokeya in their pantheon. Sarojini Naidu was there, just to give you an idea, Sharla Devi, and then Rokeya was also included. So she is really well researched and up there. Now, the particular focus of my talk today is one of her two political texts. Rokeya was both a theoretician and an emancipator and an activist and an educationist who lived and worked in Calcutta of the time. She died in 1932, and so that was before partition. So she really veered away from direct political statements or making a political stand, but it is amazing, and especially as this is the Department of Political Science which invited me, that how aware she was, how up to date this woman from the Muslim Under-Mahal was vis-a-vis the political situation of those turbulent times. And for those whose interest will be sparked today, Please look up the Oxford Dictionary of National Biography. It's a very succinct and good introduction to this great figure. But just to very quickly go through the whole, her biography. She was born in a decadent and impoverished Muslim landlord family of Pairaban in present-day Rangpur of Bangladesh. And the family fortunes had been frittered away. The women of the family were not allowed to go to school naturally, but this was 1880s. This was the last quarter of the 19th century. And so this is a woman who had never entered the portal of a school. She was taught Urdu. You may know that the Sharif or the upper class Muslim families of Bengal had an Urdu lineage and ancestry. And my whole thesis in my book is how the whole process was Bengalicized, how the Sharif Bibiya became the Bengali Bhadra Mohila or Muslim Bhadra Mohila. Anyhow, that's a totally different thesis. But it was enough for Muslim girls of good families to know how to read the Quran and a little bit of Urdu and a little bit of rudimentary mathematics, maybe. But even Bengali was not encouraged. So Rokeya learned Bengali from her brother and sister. It was amazing that she did have a very enlightened group of siblings. And later on, she learned English when she got married from her husband, Sakhawat Hossein, a widower, a magistrate, one of the new men, the enlightened new breed of Indian men who had just returned from his training abroad and who taught his wife English. And in return, Rokeya taught Sakhawat Bengali. So those of you who do linguistics, for you it will be very interesting how these language patterns all played out. So here's this woman who never went to school, but wrote English, let alone Bengali, chased Vidyasagar Bengali and English so well that her book, Sultana's Dream, which she wrote in English, is now a text in many universities of the world, of the Western world. I remember my son, I always give this anecdote, who is in mathematics, a PhD in mathematics. When he was a teenager, he would have to type up my thesis. And at one point he said, I'm really sick and tired of this word Bhadra Mohila and Rokeya. You know, I have had to type this so many times, but Ma, I'll do it for you. Then many years later, maybe I think 15 years later, I received a rare call from the United States. And here was my son saying that, you know, Ma, I was sitting in front of the television and there was a discussion by leading feminists of USA. And they said that the first modern science fiction, other than Frankenstein, the modern, was written by a woman from a remote region of what is now Bangladesh. And so he said, my ears pricked up, and there she was, Rokeya Sakhawat Hossein. And I felt so happy that, you know, this had traveled so far. So anyhow, Rokeya was unrelenting in her enunciation, enumeration, exposition of the women's question. She was a total feminist, but that's not what they call themselves. But we can, I think, call them with their permission, wherever they may be, because she wrote relentlessly about women's domination, subordination, how that came about, and like the reformer that she was, she also provided a cure for it. Because I place her in the league of the Bengal Reformation movement. They did not just stop there. Their end task was to give a solution also. Her solution was education, okay? Her solution was wage employment. That's a different thing. But the striking thing about her feminist formulation, because I'm not going to be able to discuss that today, I'm going to go into her political thought right away, was she said, very logical, like the Reformation figure that she was, like Vidyasagar and Ram Mohan, and later Rabindranath, she was absolutely consistent and logical. She said, women are subordinated to the stage of animals, even worse than that. In her essay Griho, she says very poignantly that even animals have a home. The rabbit has a home, but we women do not have a home. Whether it's the queen in her palace or the Gudikurani in her cottage, we do not have a home to call her our own. So anyhow, she says women are oppressed and subordinated throughout history. There is a cause for this oppression, and this is the master stroke. She does not, this lady writing in the early 20th century, 1903, let's say, she writes that the cause is to be found not in God, not in the divine, not in nature or some nebulous power out there, but in human history. It is man-made, it is social, and it is created by humans. That is what elevates her to this status. Then she goes for the cures, and she has her own agenda. She gives her reasons, and then she gives her cures. Now, most of her work is directed, as I said, Rokeya Rachanabuli has gone through many editions now. She's very popular, even in West Bengal and Bangladesh, of course. But all her works willy-nilly come back to the women's question. And even on the night that she died, the day, the night preceding her death, she was writing Nari Lodhikar, her unfinished last essay, The Rights of Women. So she was at it all through. I would love to go on and on about her very briefly. She was a practicing Muslim, and yet she was a person who could say all the religious texts of the world are written by men. This had to be expunged later on. I sometimes, and I have to be careful, we all have to be careful what we say back home. But we do say that had it been the present day, she would not have been able to say this. You know, there would be a price on her head because she did not qualify that except this. And there are some things about the religion that she practiced, which is very rigid. It would not allow anyone to question the status of the faith that was revealed to the Muslims. Anyhow, but at the same time, she said her prayers in her own way. She must have worked out a solution, and that is not our concern today. So she died. She never had a family. She was a widow at a very early age, no children. I think she gave birth, but they died in infancy. So this reminds me of Tagore's short stories, how in most of them, you know, those 9900 short stories, we find women who are not really the happy mother or the happy wife. And one of the things that we say is that if you were, it's open to question, if you were doing domesticity all your life, would you have the time left over to serve humanity? So the paper today is called Empire, Resistance and Gender, Rokeya Sakhawat Hossein's Anti-Colonial Allegory, Muktiphal. Muktiphal, literally fruit of the tree of liberty, was first published in the Bongio Muslim Sahitya Patrika, Bhadra Kartik issue, 1921. It was published in the same year as Rokeya's anthology, Motijur. It remains a relatively unread text, even in the wake of the hue and cry following a rediscovery of its author. Muktiphal is replete with clues to the perception of colonization and the women's question in the context of the anti-colonial struggle by a female member of the colonized intelligentsia. That too from the pen of a woman who came from the relatively more backward Mahal of Muslim Bengal. By the second decade of the 20th century, middle-class Hindu and Brahmo women were visible in the political arena of Bengal, but Muslim women were much less so. The story, for those who don't know the text. It's an allegory, as I said. Kangalini, dispossessed queen of Pholapur, lies sick and ailing. Flies swarm around her, putrefying body. One by one, her sons, Darpanando, Probin, Nobin, Himan, Ninduk, and like, approach her with promises and prescriptions for recovery. Darpananda, suited and booted, marches in promising her gold and Benares saris. Probin and Nobin are concerned, as are Srimati and Shumati, her daughters. Ninduk, the eternal critic, looks on and is ever ready with criticism. Kangalini waves these remedies aside, and she narrates that a sannyasin, once a guest in her house, had seen the unequal treatment meted out by Kangalini to her sons and daughters. Kangalini had justified herself by saying, "Can my daughters defend the kingdom of Pholapur?" The sannyasi had predicted the Kangalini would have to reap the fruit of her karma, and that her sons would bring her pain. A sickness would visit her. How could she be released from this sickness? On the tip of Kailasha, the sannyasi said, grew the tree of the fruit of liberty. The day someone brought a fruit from the tree, Kangalini would regain her health. Probin, Dorpo, and all the men, on hearing this, break out in pledges to bring the fruit. I would just like to say that one of my major focuses in my work is syncretism, the beautiful secular culture that the subcontinent of South Asia was once heir to. And here's this Muslim woman, a practicing Muslim, who has no qualms about invoking Hindu mythology, Muslim mythology, and bringing it all very convincingly in one platform. Of course, all in the cause of women's emancipation. The scene shifts to Kailasha, where the jinns, here is the Muslim mythology coming in, or the Muslim beliefs rather. Aerial beings made from fire, mentioned in the Holy Quran, and Pari, have received news of the human quest for Muktiphal. The king commands his army of Doityos to vanquish the arrogant humans of Pholapur, but the prince, more in tune with the times, suggests more subtle and clever modes of subjugation. He recommends Maya Vidya, a magic art whereby humans are beguiled into subservience, forgetting their inner selves and aspirations. The prince's policy, eschewing violence, meets with hearty approval by the residents of Mayapur, and they send for the Maya Vidya Visharats and Mayavi Gayoks, the sorcerers and magic singers. The quest is on, and soon it turns into a struggle. At the center of the struggle for Muktiphal is the building of the bridge to Kailasha the bridge which will enable Kangalini's disempowered sons to reach the liberty tree. But they are unsuccessful. Dejected and unsuccessful, they rally around their dying mother, once again holding forth false promises. Srimati and Shumati, the daughters who had been tending her, waiting each day for their brothers to return, are now enraged and not to be brushed aside any longer. They say that they want to be a part of this struggle, armed resistance or not. Kangalini urges her sons to take their daughters into the fold and says that if they don't enter the struggle, she will never be cured. And the allegory ends with Kangalini's joyful proclamation, "Now my brave daughters have joined the quest, I dare to hope." Now the reading. The first reading. In rereading Muktiphal today, one must read with caution to avoid inserting into the text meanings Rokeya may not have intended. At one level, however, the message of Muktiphal is clear, and its rendition from allegory to the socio-historical context is not difficult. Rokeya herself, and as historians, this is what we really lap up when the contemporary author provides a clue. So she herself says in the advertisement to Motichur, Volume 2 in 1921, that Muktiphal was written in the immediate aftermath of the split in Congress in 1907. Kangalini is Desh Matrika, or motherland. Muktiphal is a subversive text about dispossession, or more specifically, dethronement from political power and the struggle for restitution of sovereignty. Restitution here probably meant total independence. This was the time when all that the Congress played and all that, right up to 1942, Mahatma Gandhi had not taken the do or die path. Subhash Bose had, and we all know the conflict and the various divisions that had taken place. And then to confound matters more, there was the revolutionaries of Bengal, the Anushilan Shomiti, Khudiram, all Badul Binoy Dinesh. And it is very interesting that Rokeya has two poems dedicated to Khudiram and another revolutionary. It's amazing. She didn't much write poetry. And the other interesting thing that I want to point out is she died in 1932. The Muslim League was formed in 1906. So this was her community. This was a community which called the girls who went to her school prostitutes. My grandmother's sister did. And I remember my grandmother telling me, they used to live in Calcutta, that Rokeya used to go from door to door saying that we teach them housework, we teach them how to be good wives and daughters. Please do not turn me away empty-handed, give your daughters. This was the ambience in which she was writing, but never did she once say that she supported the formation of the Muslim League. That is a woman who knows when the Congress split, and it's evident that she kept abreast of every political event that was taking place. So this is amazing, that how could a woman, a widow, without any great means, adhere to this kind of policy. And in one of her reminiscences, she says that all my life, my hands is like that of a chimney sweeper, of one clean spots. I go on cleaning the pot, which is society. My hands are black as a result, but the chimney is not even clean. So she was very critiqued, very attacked, but also supported. There was a wind of change in the air. So this is the ambience in which she was writing this allegory. So Kangalini herself says, the day I was dethroned, turned queen to destitute, I desired death. Desh Matrika is surrounded by her sons and daughters. Surprisingly, there's no husband in this familiar tableau. It's very surprising. You would think that, whatever he may be doing, painting a picture or just, having the hookah, but there is no mention of the husband whatsoever, or any mention of one. But in keeping with the domestic mold in which the world was viewed by the Bengali middle class at the time, Rokeya narrates the tale in familiar terms. And this was rather clever that somehow she managed. Somehow Ravi Thakur managed in Golpaguchcho. But then again, the boundaries of private and public are blurred. In fact, there is no private as such in Muktiphal. Kangalini even spends her days underneath a tree outside her cottage. So complete is the feeling of dispossession. So this takes us back a bit to what Partha Chatterjee said, that the colonial middle class was so dispossessed. So they hung on to the last vestiges of the private. Beyond the hills in the distance is Mayapur, magical habitat of the colonial masters, guided by an army of giants whose strength, however, is no longer required in this. The second phase of colonization, where other more subtle forms of subjugation, jadoo or magic, have been devised. And for those of you who are familiar with Gauri Vishwanathan's classic work, Masks of Conquest, this is very much in tune with that. The second phase or the later phase of colonization where brute force is no longer required, but magic vidya or hegemonic means are. Each of Kangalini's children represents a responsive strategy regarding the colonial situation. Her children are arrayed in their selfishness, prevarication, impotence, greed, hypocrisy, valor, wisdom, and nobility. And yet all of them fail. Dorpanando is the blatant, brutal colonial collaborator. And his name means that, Dorpo Anando, who fattens on ill-gotten marmalade. Probin is the oily, servile, double-tongued collaborator, engaged in futile nationalist politics through petitions and appeals. His belief in the magnanimity of the colonial masters strikes the reader as false or pitiful. Life is the valiant and dying son and loving son who dies while tending his mother, an untimely death, reminding readers of the sad waste of human resource, perhaps Rokeya's evocation of the premature deaths of many valiant revolutionary youths who had joined the secret resistance movement against the British. Ninduk and Thimak are not given to action. Ninduk's role, like that of any irritating know-all but do nothing, is particularly galling. Dhiman is what his name suggests, the thinker, an upholder of moral courage. Rokeya has not elaborated on this role and neither glorifies nor belittles him. The Gandhian Satyagraha was soon to be launched, but the way to freedom in Muktiphal is not one of passive resistance. Nobin is the most positive male character in the allegory. He is of the new generation. He has learned from the mistakes of the previous generation and is contemptuous of Probin's petitioning and Dorpo's treachery. Nobin and his kind are valiant, wise, and proficient, yet he too fails to get the liberty fruit. Because, and this is Rokeya's answer, straightforward, if somewhat naive answer to you, maybe, because women have not been incorporated into the team as equal partners. Then there's some more, I'm going to just skip that, the Bhadralok definition of women, how Rokeya also critiques that, brings it up, where Srimati says, I want to accompany you. And Probin says, no, sister, I cannot let you go up to Kailash. Talk with me. Read your novels. Contemplate the creator while you sing along with me. This should suffice. Beyond this, I cannot grant you more freedom or equality. But there is change in the air, etc. And Rokeya has called this Rupkatha, and the end ends on a note of hope. And she died in 1932, so she did not see the independence of India. So that is where it ends. Now, this section is beyond the allegory. Let us now descend to a deeper layer and attempt to trace linkages between concrete events, personalities, and ideologies extant at the time. What were the dominant strategies in against the colonizing power at the time? Who were some of the female protagonists on the scene in Rokeya's Bengal? And what were the existing modes of women's political participation? Rokeya herself had set the stage for Muktiphal at the moment of the Congress split at the Surat session of 1907. One has then to read the allegory against the ideological and material canvas of the concepts of Swadesh and Swaraj. There are difficulties of ambivalence, of course, in this exercise. For example, does Kolhapur represent Bengal or all of India? What exactly is the final goal which will be achieved on partaking of the liberty food? What is the mukti envisaged by Rokeya? Is it self-rule or Swaraj? If the latter, which formulation of Swaraj? Does she leave any clues? The very title and the unfolding of the tale points to restitution of sovereignty as the ultimate goal for a nation. However, since Rokeya lived and wrote in Calcutta, it would not be surprising if her immediate backdrop was the Bengal situation of 1905, when the Swadeshi Andolan had started to unfold in its economic aspect. There is no allusion to the dismemberment of the land, however. The communal conflict and controversy over the matter of Bongo Bongo. The main theme being the motherland diseased and devastated by colonial rule. There's no direct mention of economic boycott. There is, however, ample reference to militant opposition to rulers, which may be read as the terrorist phase of the Swadeshi Andolan. In fact, running through the entire text is the theme of the futility of constitutional politics and a celebration of more direct physical resistance. In Muktiphal, Rokeya is rather silent on the matter of passive and moral resistance. Khudiram laid down his life in 1908. So did Kanailal, Profulla Chaki, Shatyendranath, and others. These events are apprehended in the untimely death of life. In her poem Nirupam Bir in 1921, Rokeya in fact pays homage to Kanailal. Of course, at this juncture, the concept of Swadeshi and Swaraj was somewhat blended and was certainly apprehended as a viable alternative to the petitionary politics of the Congress, etc. The years 1885 to 1907, the 23 years are alluded to by Rokeya twice in Muktiphal, when Srimati accuses Proveen. By 1906, Indian nationalists had reached a parting of the ways. Now I need to skip to the, how many minutes are left?
It is 35.
35 minutes have gone by here. Okay. Rokeya died in 1932, just as women were embarking on a more militant phase of resistance. Kalpana Datta's Chittagong Armory raid, Pritilata Vadidha's attack on the Pahartuli Officers Club, Shanti and Shuniti's firing on the British magistrate in Kumilla, Leela Nag's underground terrorist affiliation, Beena Dash's attempt to kill the governor, all took place in the 1930s. One is left to wonder what Rokeya, who celebrated the quote-unquote terrorist, martyr, Kanailal in Nirupam Bir, would have had to say about Bengal's militant daughters. As matters stood, Rokeya was placed historically amidst constitutional Congress and Gandhian politics as far as women were concerned. And as I said, the Muslim League had been established, but Rokeya is silent. Rokeya's familiarity, Shawala Devi, Sharajini Nanji, and Sister Nivedita, and descent. Now I'm going to read from this section. Rokeya was not the only voice among Muslim women to dwell on Swadesh and Swaraj. It surprises me a lot because I go to other parts of the world to give seminars, that how they have sort of made a pigeonhole for Muslim women. And of course, I deal with Bengali Muslim women and Muslim women of the Andar Mahal, and they have this stereotype. And whereas I'm not going to glorify any community, there are many voices which need to be placed alongside the major or majoritarian voice in whichever community, whether it be Hindu and Muslim. And I think in this day and age, when a kind of syncretism, and there's this other lady, precursor to Rokeya Sakhawat, now Faizunnisa Chaudhurani, with whom I began my doctoral work. And for those of you who are interested, it is available in the CATS library. Now, Faizunnisa, who preceded Rokeya, knew Sanskrit, knew Persian, knew Bengali, knew Urdu. I don't think she knew English, but as she used to play the sitar, she learned from a Hindu guru, and this was a very orthodox Muslim family, Faizunnisa Chaudhurani of Homnabad in Kumilla. And so it's the fabric, the tapestry is so much more intricate and complex. But even that, of course, is being eroded. Do we have a Faizunnisa Chaudhurani in Kumilla today? It's going to be our challenge to see that her heritage is kept alive. It is our challenge to see that Rokeya or Pandita Ramabai or Sharula Devi or let's say Raja Ram Mohan or Vidyasagar, their legacy is kept alive. So Rokeya was not the only voice among Muslim women to dwell on Swadesh and Swaraj. In 1905, Faizunnisa Khatun had written her piece Swadesh Anurag in Nabunur, where she urged women to boycott British goods in favor of indigenous products. Faizunnisa never came to the forefront in politics or literature and probably led the quiet life of a school teacher in Pabna. Much more well-known and remarkable a personality was B. Amma or Abidi Banu Begum, who was an activist in her own right as well as mother to the famous brothers Muhammad Ali and Shaukat Ali. Though not a Bengali, B. Amma traveled all over India, exhorting Muslim women to emerge from Parda and was well known in Bengal. Rokeya certainly would have followed her career. B. Amma's remark at a public meeting in Punjab on Swaraj, made in 1922, falls outside the time frame of her present study by a year. If we take 1921, still it is worth citing. She said, "There's nothing as precious as liberty," and asked women to leave Swaraj after their death to their children as inheritance. Swaraj could not be had for the asking, but was sure to come if people had courage and women the heart to sacrifice. And that brings us to the final part of this essay. Rokeya's vision of a secular, syncretic society. Brought up in a severely religious and traditional Muslim family of Rangpur in present-day Bangladesh, she herself, as I said, was a practicing Muslim to the end of her days. Yet time and again, in her various works, such as Poddurag, which I had the joy of teaching this term at the institute here, Sultana's Dream, her feminist theoretical social essays, and Muktiphal, she transcends the boundaries of community and culture and constructs a vision of a secular and syncretic society. Utopian? Yes. But to Rokeya, this utopian vision came naturally and forcefully. Muktiphal is strewn with imagery borrowed from Hindu literary tradition. Kangalini's children are called Darpananda Province, Srimati. The seat of power, Kailasha, is the mythological abode of the gods and goddesses of the Hindu pantheon. The simile of Draupadi's sari, an untied hair, and Kailash is given a very noble status in the text. Okay, the simile of Draupadi's sari and untied hair, the Shannashi, are a part and parcel of Hindu culture. But juxtaposed with all these are images taken from Islamic culture as well. The residents of Mayapur are called jinns, and this one sentence, a linguist would have a much better time with it. I want to quote this. Kangalini's lament, quote, "This tattered quilt of mine, one of it is in the hands of the jinns of Mayapur, while with the other end, I, like the half-naked Draupadi, try to preserve my modesty. Ah, Allah, forgive me." So in that one sentence, she has brought all these strands together. Rokeya's synthetic juxtaposition may seem jarring to some or interesting and rich to others, but it is indeed unusual and shows a mind whose depth and range was encompassing. It is sharply evident again in a footnote in Muktiphal, and I need to read that out. This is the last section, last paragraph. The saying goes that jinns do not succumb easily to humankind and are adept at disrupting human meditation endeavors. Even Vasudev, who wrote Mahabharata, I think, right? Okay. His meditation disrupted, had lamented to his goddess, "I spend my hours in thought of you. What do you gain in deluding me?" Thus did Devi Durga repay Vyas. So she was very steeped in Hindu mythology. Such was the sweep of Rokeya's vision, standing at this end of the 20th century, 21st, or this beginning of the 21st century. We feel the beauty and the fragility of that vision. We feel its strength too. But most important, perhaps, is the fact that we should remind ourselves once in a while, perhaps rediscover, that such visions were nurtured by a woman from the Andar Mahal so many years ago. And now I cannot speak for other countries of South Asia. They will have to speak for themselves. I will speak for the country that I reside in. It would be dishonest to claim that there's nothing rotten in the state of Denmark. And it would be naive and the behavior of an ostrich with its head in the sand. So this is a legacy that is fast eroding. Feminist scholars, to which I like to say I belong, have long said, I think it was Laila Ahmed in Women Under Islam, that the more monolithic a society becomes in terms of defining religion, religious identity, the more it loses its elasticity. And it would not be incorrect to say that in our country, there is a contestation on everything is not absolutely fine. And as the Bangabandhu chair, someone who has lived through 1971 as a teenager, I have seen the first unfolding of that vision of the dream of 1971, the Mukti Juddha, the Great Liberation War, the call for which was given by Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. I've seen that dream unfold, take shape through a very brutal genocide and bloody war. I also see that dream facing very dangerous and absolutely insurmountable threats at the moment. I don't know what the outcome will be, but of course, we believe in the power of the soil, in the power of the people, Jana Shakti. So if Rokeya could transcend her milieu and cut across existing notions of community, class, and gender, I like to think that so perhaps can be. With that, I thank you.